Peter is, as Donna mentioned, a founding partner of Summit Trail Advisors. His team at Summit Trail works with entrepreneurs, private equity partners, professional athletes, and entertainers to coordinate the development and implementation of individualized investment strategies. Prior to Summit Trail, Peter led an 8-person investment team at Barclays Wealth and Investment Management Group. He's our other Hall of Famer on the dais. So Peter was an academic All-American and the College Football Hall of Fame Scholar Athlete Award winner as quarterback at Yale University, where he broke 11 school passing records and 1 NCAA record. In 2014, he was featured in Crane's 40 Under 40 list of business and civic leaders. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Marv Levy, who may not need any introduction to many in the room, like me, who are big NFL fans. Mr. Levy is the former head coach of the Buffalo Bills. Coach Levy led the Bills to an unprecedented 4 straight Super Bowls. He was born in Chicago and still resides in Chicago. He's one of us. Attended Coe College in Iowa and has a master's degree in English from Harvard University. He's also an author and poet, and I think we're going to hear a poem here this morning, this afternoon. His first head coaching job was with the Kansas City Chiefs from 78 to 82, and in 86 he was hired by Ralph Wilson to be the head football coach at the Buffalo Bills. He went on to become the most successful coach in Bills history with a 112-70 record. Bills won 6 Eastern Division titles out of the next 8 seasons and made playoff all 8 out of 9 years. During that run, Coach Levy and the Bills would become the only team in NFL history to go to 4 straight Super Bowls. He was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio in 2001. In his NFL coaching career, Coach Levy ranks 10th all-time with a 154 and 120 record and won 6 division championships, 4 straight AFC championships, and he is one of only 14 coaches to win over 100 games with one NFL team. Upon retiring, Coach Levy turned to writing, as I mentioned earlier, publishing a New York Times best-selling autobiography, Where Else Would You Rather Be? He then wrote Between the Lies, a fictional novel that sheds light on the coach, general manager, and owner relationships that take place in the NFL, a topic we may touch on here this morning. And he has continued his creative endeavors, as I mentioned, with a book of poetry titled It's Time for a Rhyme. So please join me in welcoming Coach Marv Levy.
Well, thank you, Pat, and thank all of you for joining us, and most important, thank you, Coach, for sharing your afternoon with us and giving us this opportunity to learn from you today.
Well, thank you for including me.
Yes. So to that end, I thought I'd share with the audience a quick story about our background. About 15, 16 years ago, I was a sophomore in college playing football at the University of Wisconsin. And we'd just come off a victory in the Rose Bowl against UCLA, in which I was the backup quarterback, and I thought the table was set to have 3-year run to be the starter, and then my coach who recruited me and my quarterback coach left the program to go to the NFL. And I was kind of set into a tailspin and trying to evaluate in a new system where I likely wasn't getting a chance to play. Do I stay at Wisconsin? Do I decide to transfer to another school? And I reached out to Coach, and he agreed to sit down and meet with me and just help me think through that process. And I kind of went into that meeting, ready to talk some X's and O's. I brought some game tape with me from college and from high school, and we did, talk football. But what really came out when I spent that time with you, Coach, was all of the amazing things you did beyond the football field, right? You talked to me about getting a master's at Harvard, spending time getting his law degree, and in addition to some great advice I was getting from my parents, that to me really opened my eyes to what I wanted to do and that decision and how it was going to impact the rest of my life. So I ended up transferring out to Yale, had a great experience on the football field there, but also more importantly, off the field. So number one, I just want to thank you for that, because I don't think I properly thank you for the impact you had on my life. But hopefully today, all of us can share, in Coach's wisdom. So why don't we talk a little bit about your background? So grew up South Shore, Chicago, in a football city, right? But when I think of, Chicago football legends of, the Dick Buckuses or the Mike Dickas, those are gentlemen that kind of ooze football, right? And they even physically, look like bears, right? Whereas you, if a stranger that didn't know your background ran into you on the street, I don't know if, NFL Hall of Famer would be the first thing that would pop into their head. And certainly looking at, your background, there's so many other things. So what led you to, wanting to be an NFL head coach?
Well, I never thought about being an NFL head coach, to tell you the truth. I played football at a small Division III college, and loved it. I had great regard for the man who was the head coach of the team. Dick Clawson was his name. And when I graduated, I left to go to Harvard Law School. And the last day when I remember saying goodbye to Dick, he said, "Marv, if you ever want to coach, you've got a job here." Boy, did that resonate.
Wow.
I loved the sports. I loved athletics. I also ran varsity track, played varsity basketball during my days at Cole. But I was 3 weeks into law school, and I said, really, I kept hearing that voice from Dick Clawson. And they allowed me to transfer over, because it started a month later, to the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. I did, got my master's that year, and 2 years later, after a couple of years at a boys prep school, I was back at Cole. And from that point on, I spent a lot of time in colleges. I was an assistant at Cole. We had great teams there against our competition. Went to him he got the head job at New Mexico. 2 years later, when he moved on to Arizona as athletic director, I was promoted to head coach at New Mexico, and then I had head coaching stints at William and Mary, Cal Berkeley, and finally moved into the pros.
Right.
Long-winded answer, there it is.
Okay, so then, and we all know you, right, as the Hall of Fame Bills coach, but as Pat mentioned, your first stint as a head coach was with the Chiefs, right?
No, my first pro head coach was with the Montreal Alouettes.
Oh,
of the
right.
Canadian Football League.
There you
If you
go.
want me to speak French, I'll try.
And then first NFL coaching
Yeah,
job with the Chiefs. So that, I can only imagine, you finally reached, what at the time was probably, the pinnacle NFL head coaching job, 5-year run, and then, you and the staff were let go, which is not something that's uncommon in the industry. But at the same time, what type of, just personal resilience did it take to, kind of get knocked down the mountain a bit and then climb your way back up, to another head coaching job with the Bills?
I moved into Kansas City. They'd been 2-14 the year before. We had very tiny incremental improvement. Next year we were 4-12. Then we won 7. Then we won 8. Then we won 9, but didn't make the playoffs. And I was terminated. The owner was a wonderful man, Lamar Hunt. And 2 years later, after I had a 1-year stint with the now defunct Chicago Blitz in the USFL, Lamar called Ralph Wilson, the owner of the Bills, and said he felt he had made a mistake. He ought to think about me. I was interviewed and fortunately was able to get that job.
That's great. That's great. What about just talking about resilience, not only personally but as a team, right? I mean, you did something that probably never be done again in any pro sports in terms of, taking the Bills to the Super Bowl, not winning the Super Bowl, and then kind of recharging and leading the team back to the Super Bowl, and you did that 3 times in a row. How do you? We're all running organizations or divisions within organizations. What did you learn through that process of kind of resetting goals and reinvigorating a team to kind of go and reach, the same heights?
And again, I address my responses to you, Peter, and then
Sure.
to the audience as well. So if I look away, that's the reason. But yes, the point is made that we went to 4 consecutive Super Bowl games, but didn't win any of them. What about it? What's the feeling? What is it like? First of all, the general manager of the Buffalo Bills is a fellow named Bill Polian. Just went into the Hall of Fame last year as the greatest general manager in the history of the game, in my opinion. Bill and I decided at the outset we would bring onto our team only people of high character. We did not confuse it with personality. Some of them were very extroverted, some of them were more laid back, but were they good citizens? Did they show up for work all the time? Did they not blame their opponent? Did they dedicate themselves? These are the kind of guys we had. And they were so resilient, despite the crushing experience of losing those games. And I remember, we talked about me writing some poetry. I remember after we lost our first game, flying back on the plane from Tampa to Buffalo, where we would have a team meeting to tie down things for the off season before they go. Through my mind went a 4-line poem that came from a book of poetry my mother had given to me when I left for the Army Air Corps during World War II. And on the train to camp, I remember, I don't know why, 40 years before, it came back to me with the words of an old Scottish warrior. They were, "Fight on, my men," Sir Andrew said. "A little I'm hurt, but not yet slain. I'll just lie down and bleed a while. Then I'll rise and fight again." Well, I posted that on the bulletin board outside our team meeting room. And about 10 players afterwards goes, "Hey, coach, you have a copy of that? I'd like to have it." And in the following years, whenever some setback occurred, somebody, not me, would post that on the bulletin board. This was the most resilient group of guys. And if I had to say how we approached it, when we lose one of those Super Bowl games, to come that close, we came within a foot and a half, a missed field goal in the final play of a game on the first one that would have won the game. But we didn't, the Giants did. But if there was a formula we had, it was, yes, there's a period you mourn, but don't make it too long. 10 days, whatever. There's a period where you own up. What might we have done differently? What didn't we do well enough? Then you say, you realize the great people you're working with, all the way through the front office, all the way up to Ralph Wilson, all the guys on the field, the players. Then you make a plan. And then, a great idea is only a job half done. Then you go to work on it. I used to tell our players, don't tell me you have the will to win. Tell me you have the will to prepare. Because if you don't have the will to prepare, you don't have the will to win. So we were able to fight our way back, became the impossible dream, but I'll remember them all fondly. And the fans in Buffalo, I'll remember fondly. They supported us wonderfully during that time. If I have a little bit of an aside on those Buffalo Bills fans, I remember walking up the tunnel, folks, after those games we had won, and they'd be there flashing me that Winston Churchill V for victory sign. And even after we lost, with a slight twist of the wrist, they'd give me
Oh, that's good. So it's funny you mentioned that quote, it's not the will to win, but the will to prepare to win. Last night I was speaking on the phone with one of your former players, John Holisek, who now is the coach of my alma mater, Loyola Academy, and he just led Loyola to their first state title since back in the day, my freshman year. And when I was asking John, what made you such a special coach, before I could even finish that question, he mentioned that quote. He said, my favorite Marvism was, it's not the will to win, but it's the will to prepare to win, and identifying those that are willing to put in the work and put in the preparation to go out there and win. So when we're thinking about building our respective teams within our organizations, how did you extract those that had that internal desire to prepare to win? How did you hire for that with your staff? How did you identify that when drafting players or signing players? Because that's hard, right? That's not, everyone says they want to win, but how do you figure out who really wants to prepare?
Okay, well, I keep talking about the relationship that I had with Bill Polian, the general manager, and we really determined very early that we would only go after highly motivated, high character players. And Bill's mantra, it's total organization that wins. Not just a great coach, great coaching staff, general manager, people that work in the organization. Total organization wins. So we really had a department of player personnel that went out and scouted. They knew the parameters which we wanted, not just the ability, not just the vertical jump or the time in the 40-yard dash that a player had, but he knew the parameters of what they were like. And again, we didn't want to confuse it, as I said before, with personality. So we wanted guys with great work ethic, and we had them. And they were resilient, high character guys. I said, I don't ever remember them placing blame on someone else. I don't ever remember that. And, somebody once asked me, on your team, who was good in the locker room? And my answer to that one was, the equipment manager was good in the locker room. It's how they conduct themselves out on the field of play.
That's great. Another thing John mentioned just about your leadership style was your willingness and ability to delegate, right?
To do what?
To delegate to your staff.
Yeah.
He said you were masterful at finding incredibly talented people around you and truly delegating and not micromanaging your coordinators, not micromanaging your staff. And I think, today, a hurdle that all business leaders and all leaders of any organization faces, I feel like great leaders are driven towards a mission and one goal, but a lot of times that drive can, cloud our vision, where we're not open to new ideas and not open to really putting the ball in the hands of other people. So can you talk to us a little bit about the importance to you on
Well, once again, I'll reiterate, it's a great coaching staff, not just a great head coach. Yes, you oversee, you're filled in, you understand what is happening, but there are certain areas where I know that our offensive coordinator is studying their defense as we prepare to play the Patriots or the Broncos, whoever. As we're studying their defense, he's spending his full time on it. I'm in a lot of areas. I'll be knowledgeable. I'll be filled in. There might be times that I might say, no, we're going to do this. I remember the greatest comeback game in the history of the league. One of those we had to win in a playoff in order to get to the Super Bowl. And I remember being down to a certain degree, and our offensive coordinator said, Marv, we've got to kick a field goal here. And there are times where you'd go past him. Jim Schaffner, a great offensive coordinator, said, no, Jim, we're going for it on fourth down. Now, we connected. Touchdown. Tommy Prothro, a former coach, once said it before, what makes a decision right most of the time is what happens after you make it. but that one worked. If it didn't, okay.
That's great. That's great. So one of my favorite quotes, and I think it applies to both your industry and mine, is a quote by Da Vinci that reads, "Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication." And I was reading about how you guys kind of revolutionized the NFL offense with the no huddle, and you always said that simplicity was actually the key to running the no huddle offense, which seems a little counterintuitive. But can you explain that?
Yeah. Simplicity, what was his quote?
So the Da Vinci quote was, "Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication."
Sophistication is, okay, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Okay, I agree. I do agree. After the 1989 season, this might be a little bit long-winded. I hope we're okay here.
We got time.
At the end of the 1989 season, we were in the playoffs. Going into the fourth quarter, we were trailing by 18 points. At that point, there was no two-point conversion yet in the league. Everything was a touchdown and a PAT is 7. So I turned to our offensive coordinator, Ted Marchabrota at the time, said, Ted, we're not waiting till the end of the game to go into our hurry-up offense. He said, there's 15 minutes left. We got to score 3 touchdowns to win. So we went to our hurry-up offense, our so-called 2-minute drill. Most guys that know football know what that is. Down the field we went, Jim Kelly, touchdown. Okay, when we finally stopped them, got the ball back with about 8 minutes to go, took another drive, no huddle down the field, touchdown. Now there's about 3 minutes left. We onside kicked, didn't recover it, stopped them with about a minute to play, took it all the way down the field to about the 8-yard line on the last play of the game. We're down by 4 points. Last play of the game, Jim throws a pass to one of our backs, Ronnie Harmon, who had done a great job in that. Ronnie trying to keep his feet in bounds, looked down, dropped the pass. We lost the game. All right, we were out of the playoffs. We're walking off the field. Ted Marchabrota, our offensive coordinator on this side of me, Tom Bresnahan, our great line coach on this side, all three of us looking at each other, and I forget who said it, whether it was me, Ted, or Tom. That ought to be our offense next year. So the next year, we ran the no huddle. We introduced, a lot of people are running it now, the no huddle offense. Now, in order to make that work, your quarterback has to call 75, 80% of the plays out there without the time it takes to put it through his headset and all that. He has to do that. You got to line up. You got to see the defense make the call, snap the ball, do it again, line up, go. You got to simplify your offense. We cut our playbook by 80%. What did that mean? Wow. We went into practice. We could practice at a tempo you can't believe. The quarterback had great command of it. Yeah, we didn't have every little wrinkle and trinket in the offense, but his confidence grew, the players' confidence grew. We got great repetition on each play. We got great conditioning work. Our practices were shortened. All of those things tended, but it reduced it. And so got very simple. I also remember the first day I took over as head coach of the Bills in midseason in 1986. The first words out of my mouth when I walked into that team meeting room, and I couldn't have pointed out Jim Kelly or Bruce Smith or any of them, was, fellas, I got great news for you. What it takes to succeed is simple, but it isn't easy. If you run, throw, block, tackle, catch, kick, better than your opponent, you're going to win. Now you got to go to work on it. Lots of fundamentals, simplicity. So we worked on fundamentals, not on a bunch of tricks. And that's how our players could execute so well. I realized that hard work. I remember one day Bruce Smith, a great Hall of Fame defensive lineman, one day at training camp, hot as day, I can remember. We had a pretty hard fundamental practice. Bruce tapped me on the shoulder. I looked up and he said, Coach, who put the fun in fundamentals? I'm still searching for an answer, by the way. Anyway, simplicity. It was Henry David Thoreau who uttered those words, simplicity, simplicity. Given his sentiment on that, I don't know why he didn't say it just once, but he did.
Oh, that's great. So why don't I we have about 5 minutes, and then I'd like to open up for questions for a while from the audience. But before we shift gears, I'd like to talk a little bit about kind of life outside of football, right? So you just celebrated your 90th birthday this fall, right? And I read an article that was written about 10 years ago saying that you were an 80-year-old who refused to act his age when you were still running the Bills front office. But what is it that drives you to keep reinventing yourself, right, and keep striving for new things and evolving, whether it's as an author, as a poet, as a coach, as a father and a husband? What has it been?
Well, surrounded by wonderful people, that always helps.
Yep.
Wife, daughter, other family, that always helps. But I don't know. It's enjoyment. I always enjoyed literature. My mother inspired it. My mother had gone to first grade. That's all. But she had read everything. She inspired a lot of it. I always did enjoy literature. I was a mediocre high school student, by the way. And I remember in an English class, we were assigned the book A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. I faked my way through it somehow. I think I got a D, got through it. Somehow or other, I didn't really read it. Now I was in the Army Air Corps, and I had a bad knee injury, and I was in the hospital. And I somehow limped down to the end of the hall where there was a library. There was one book there, A Tale of Two Cities. I got it back to bed. It was fascinating. I was blown away. I was now 3 or 4 years older than I had been before. I was blown away. And then I got hooked on literature and so on. And so when I finally retired, I did say the day I retired, I remember saying to myself, retired means you've got new tires and you're ready to roll. So there are other things I like doing. I did radio and television for several years. I enjoyed writing, and I started doing it and kept doing it. And then about a year and a half ago, I had written a novel, and I'd written a memoir. In tribute to my mother, I started to write some poems, and I just kept going. I just kept on going.
That's great. So
it was fun. And why I do a lot of things, if you don't mind, I may read one poem now.
That'd be great.
If you don't mind. When I've been asked, what inspired you to be a coach? And here it is. Coaching in the NFL is the name of this one poem that's in that book. There's 150 poems there. When you win, you're the one whom they adore. But if your team comes out on the short end of the score, you are subject to scorn and even to wrath. So why did I decide to follow this path? Why hunger for a job that almost everyone who's hired somewhere along the way is likely to be fired? It's a job where you can begin to feel like a fool as you keep moving your kids to a new town and school, where for 7 days a week for most of the year, you are away from home and those whom you hold dear, where you must deal with a roster that is always changing and with those egos that are often raging. But then again, there is that feeling on game day as those players sprint out onto the field of play. There are those avid fans too. They add to the fun. We share joy and excitement whenever we've won. Yes, from dawn till midnight, during that long season, the coach is in a tiny film room or outside freezing. But despite those long hours and all that strife, I never have really worked a day in my life. So that's what I thought.
That's great. That's great. Well, why don't we open up to some questions then?
Coach, since I've got the mic, I'm going to ask the first question. You talk about game day, and I've heard you talk about game day for you was not stressful, it was fun. Can you talk about that?
Sure. It's not stress. How do you handle the stress? I've been asked. There was no stress. There was maybe excitement, adrenaline that you'd feel. You got to make 200 decisions. You got 30 seconds to make each one of them. But so what? It's fun. I used to tell our players too in the pro ranks, fellas, you don't get paid for Sunday. You get paid for getting ready for Sunday. Sunday is fun. That's the bonus. So it was for the same reasons I might have presented in this poem. It was just sheer enjoyment for me, unless we lost.
Okay, we've got mics on either side, and if you would stand up, just introduce yourself and ask your question. Who's got a question? That one right here.
Coach,
Can you wait for the mic? Yeah.
I'm good.
I never met a mic I didn't like. Thank you.
There you go. Thank you.
Coach, of all the players that you'd coached, who had the best leadership skills? The one you really, when you saw him on the field, he just embodied leadership.
I can't give that, I'll answer that if you answer this one. Which hand made the noise?
Your left.
But there were several. I can point out some. Certainly Jim Kelly, by how he conducted himself, by the example he set, by how hard he worked. His backup quarterback, Frank Reich, was unbelievable. What preparation, never knowing if he's going to be in the game. Again, in the 1992 C playoff, Jim Kelly was injured and out. We played what was the greatest comeback in the history of the NFL, where Jim Kelly was out, Thurman Thomas was out with an injury. Our great linebacker Cornelius Bennett was out with an injury. At halftime, we were losing 28-3. We're in the locker room at halftime, and I walked over to our Frank Reich, our backup quarterback, who had been having a disastrous first half. I said, Frank, they tell me you led the greatest comeback in college football history. He had, as a substitute for Boomer Esiason. And I said, today you're going to lead the greatest comeback in pro football. He nodded his head. And we're walking up the tunnel. The quarterback coach, Jim Chaffner, says, Coach, we're down by 25 points. The greatest comeback has been 28 points. And he said, I know. He said, I played in that game. I was with the Detroit Lions. I said, Frank doesn't know that. Don't worry about it. First play from scrimmage in the second half, Frank Reich throws a touchdown. However, it was to their defensive back who intercepted it. Goes the other way. We're now down 35-3.
There you go.
The next 6 minutes and 58 seconds, we scored 4 touchdowns. In my book, I titled that 4 scores in 7 minutes ago, by the way. But we went on to win the game in overtime, 41-38. And Frank Reich was so instrumental for how well he prepared. By the way, I walked up to Frank after the tumult died down in the locker room after the game, and congratulated him, told him it was great. He said, Coach, he said, I knew that the greatest comeback wasn't just 25 points. That's why he threw that interception.
Oh, that's great.
I said, Frank, I tell you a bigger lie. I believe you. Okay.
Okay, next question.
But there are other great leaders that I had.
Okay, got one right here.
Jim was one.
Hey, Coach, along the same lines, who was the opposing coach that you had the most respect for and maybe even some concerns heading into Sunday?
Well, there were more than one, certainly. The one I competed against most often was Don Shula, and I have to say I have fantastic regard for him. He honored the game. His teams year after year was the least penalized team. He taught me a mantra: don't be dumb and don't be dirty. I thought the world of him. I thought a great deal of Tom Landry, of Dan Reeves, who was a coach at not to be confused with an owner named Dan Reeves. There was one with the Denver Broncos during my time there was another one. But I had respect for so many. There are several of them that I'd mention there. Don would be the one I was closest to, and still stay in close touch with him, although he's in very, very failing health right now.
Can you talk a little bit more about don't be dumb and dirty? What does that mean?
I beg your pardon?
Don't be dumb and dirty? What does that mean?
Don't be dumb and don't be dirty means don't go getting a bunch of dumb penalties that after it's over, running up and showing them how tough you are and all that stuff. Show me how tough you are within the rules. In other words, if you're a dirty player, you're a dumb player, in my opinion. And I incorporate a lot of that in that novel Between the Lines that I wrote too.
Other question?
Coach, could you talk about the relationship between the coach and the owners? Because we all, work for our shareholders.
Sure. Well, I tell you, I told you that Bill Polian and I said that total organization wins, and that sure was something that our team owner, Ralph Wilson, embraced. Ralph was just magnificent to work with. He died just a year ago at the age of 95, I believe. Ralph, he would express his opinion strongly. He would listen back. Tell you something else about him. He was a great owner. All 4 Super Bowls we went to, we have about 200 people in our organization, if you count the ladies that clean up at night, the mailroom clerk, the security guards, the people in the offices. He took every one of them to those Super Bowl games. Flew them down, hotel, tickets, meals, the works. And it's vital. And I received, and I mentioned this to you a little bit earlier, some great advice from Ralph Wilson's wife one time. When I interviewed for the job, I flew to Detroit where he lived. He took me out to dinner along with his wife one night during the interview process, and everything went well. And she told me there that evening, she said, I'm just along for the fun. She said, I don't know a thing about football, so you guys do it. Well, about a week later, I was hired. And the first day I was on the job, I received a phone call, and it was from Mrs. Wilson. And she said, Marv, I got some advice for you. And I said, gee, she just told me she doesn't know anything about football. She's going to tell me to run a reverse or something? I don't know. I said, yes, Mrs. Wilson. She said, talk to Ralph. And I sort of blinked, and I said, well, what do you mean, of course? She said, no, you don't understand. The last 2 or 3 coaches here, they just brush him off after the game. If he had something to criticize, why aren't you playing this guy instead of that guy? They'd brush him off. They'd cut him off. They wouldn't take his calls. He said, I just blinked. Certainly. The coach-owner relationship should be very ongoing. You should let them know. We made it a point every Tuesday morning, after we did a full day of studying Monday after the game, I would reserve an hour to get on the phone with Ralph, and we'd talk about this, that, and many other things. And he had a great relationship with our players, too. He came to practice every now and then. Well, he'd always come in a day or 2 before the game and mingle with the players. And they all own according to their own personality. But that's one example I can give you.
Another question? Go ahead. Yeah, there, and then we got Cheryl up here next.
Yeah, I'm just curious, getting back to, I guess, dumb and dirty or whatever. We've had with the Patriots Spygate, Deflategate, and I'm just wondering in your era to what extent do you think rules were bent, and to what extent do you think they're bent today in terms of spying or other conduct?
I would say that about 95% of the coaches and the players in the league are good guys. About 5 are jerks. That goes, 95% of the media are good guys. About 5 are jerks in a long way. But I happened to work, when I first came into the league, I came in as an assistant coach with the then Los Angeles Rams under George Allen. Those of you who are football fans know who George Allen is. One of the highest principled guys you've ever known. Quirky, he was a character like you can't believe, but he was paranoid that people were cheating on us. We always had to have our meeting room bugged. He'd bring in a crew with ladders to go around the visiting locker room all the time to be sure there weren't, some kind of tapping going on. We had a security man who would go around all the time and look at the trees outside the stadium to be sure no one was up there filming. We called him Double O, was the guy that did it. He was our security. George was paranoid about it. And also, there are some coaches that teach the game wrong. I was repulsed by the coach who's teaching his players to injure the other team. Greg Williams, I think I read this happened. I had a guy, a defensive lineman, a great kid, Phil Hansen, one of the most underrated guys I ever coached, who came to me about his second year on the team, said, Coach, I hesitate to do this, but I can't do what Coach, I won't tell you the guy's name, so-and-so is asking me to do. I said, what's that? He was trying to teach us how to take out the knee of the other team's quarterback. Well, I called the guy in. He erupted at Phil because he'd come to me about it. Phil had talked to him several times. Finally, I fired the guy right then. Not finally, right there. I'm opposed to it. I hate it. May there be some cheating going on? Yes. May there be some people doing some things that they don't think is cheating or borderline? Probably. And are there some who are cheating? They're probably, like I said, 5% who are jerks. I don't have evidence hard on anybody right now other than that one man I just talked about.
Cheryl, we'll take you. Yeah.
Coach, I have a question about the game. The game has changed over the years. It's more of a offensive game than a defensive game, and I wanted to know which one you preferred the most.
Okay, fine, Cheryl. Yes, the game has changed, but everything's changed. Medicine has changed, journalism has changed, and the changes keep going. Offenses are getting better. I'll tell you my feeling. I mean, if I really pinned to the wall which is more important, offense, defense, I once was asked the day I was hired by the Kansas City Chiefs, what's our style going to be? And I said, offense sells tickets. Kicking wins games. Defense wins championships. You will not have a functional offense, in my opinion, unless you have a great defense. If your defense is having to play catch-up, your quarterback's going to get blitzed. You're going to be predictable. Your defense is more important. More important. That's why we so often, our early draft choices were defense with the Buffalo Bills, whether it's Bruce Smith or Cornelius Bennett. Well, Cornelius, we got on a trade. He was the first draft choice. But I remember one day, my first year with the Bills, and I have high regard for the guy, our director of player personnel. On draft day, we had the 8th pick in the draft. And we were zeroing in on a linebacker who was about a 4th-rated player on the board. But in terms of ability, the number 1 rated player on the board, we had that red star, which means no character, bad character. So time came, we hit the 8th choice. Our guy was there, and so was that Red Star guy still there. And our director of player personnel, who I got along with great afterwards and everybody, you got to take him, you got to take him. We went back and forth. The clock was ticking down. Finally, he said, Marv, if we take him, he's going to go to the Pro Bowl. And I said, Norm, the guy's name was Norm Pullum, I want someone who's going to take us to the Super Bowl. And so he went along. Okay, all right. We drafted a guy. His name was Shane Conlon. Turned out to be a fantastic linebacker. Shane went to the Super Bowl. The other guy went to jail. The guy with the Red Star. Now, that's why we picked defense, but I deviated from answering, Cheryl. but defense is my answer.
All right. We're going to go one final question over here with Brad. Go ahead.
Hi, Coach. Like you, Mark Trestman came from Montreal and with the Canadian Football League and directly to the NFL. Unlike you, he was not a success as a head football coach. 2 questions. 1, did you give Coach Trestman any advice before his stint? And number 2, why do you think he was unable to succeed at the head coach level in the NFL when he was such a successful coordinator and coach in Canada?
Well, he came in and took over a team that just really wasn't very good, just like I did. Just like I did in Kansas City, and I got fired eventually. Mark is a good coach. He's not a fire and brimstone personality at all, of course. He's very quiet and laid back. He's an excellent teacher. He had an atrocious, Cheryl, defense that was trying to back him up, and so it was hard to get the best qualities out of the quarterback who's a little bit eccentric, but a good player and a good character guy in Cutler. And Cutler, now as the defense is improving, is showing it. No, I think maybe Mark will get his chance to bounce back. I don't know. Sometimes you do. I was very fortunate that I got that chance for that second choice. But I think his biggest problem was the one I've alluded to already, terrible defense.
Okay, so we got one more question? Is it somebody? Yeah, okay. Final question, and we'll wrap it up.
Not that we don't want to end up Mark Trestman. He did win last night. Going into the Hall of Fame is such an incredible accomplishment. I guess, what was that like, and what do you remember from that day?
I'm glad you asked. 2001, I was blown away to find out I was going to be inducted as a member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And I've been asked before, what was the feeling like up there? What do you think? And I'm up there, and I'm sort of looking out and thinking, man, am I really here? And I look down in the audience where a lot of those Bart Starrs and Gale Sayers and one after another go all the way back to Chuck Bednarik and guys like that are sitting. I see the look on their face, and it's, am I really here still? And they've been in there for 20 years or more. So it's tremendous honor. I just was something I never dreamed of. I started out as a high school assistant football coach at St. Louis Country Day School, and I just loved what I did. So it was a thrill, beyond my ability to vocalize. This is a thrill for me to be here with a great group, to reconnect here with Peter. I knew him when he was shorter than I was, living in my building up in Lincoln Park, and know what he's accomplished. And he mentioned John Holisek, coach at Loyola Academy, who was going to be able to come, but he had a conflict. John Loyola just won the state championship, 10 years of winning. One of the highest character guys I ever coached. And I think he's destined for great things too. Boy, can I ramble or can I ramble?
Peter, I'm going to throw it back over to you. You want to wrap it up?
Sure, yeah, we have a couple final wrap-up questions, quick ones for you here. So it's been often said that good readers make good writers, and you're certainly a good
Say
writer.
what?
That good readers make good writers.
Oh.
We know you're a good writer, but is there any one book that was particularly influential on you?
Well, A Tale of Two Cities.
There we go.
When
you actually read it the second time, right?
Yeah.
It was better.
By Charles Dickens. Then I read almost all of Dickens' stuff. And I've never read them. I'm currently reading some so-called early 20th century classics. I just finished Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen, and I'm reading This Side of Paradise by Scott Fitzgerald right now. I learned something about F. Scott Fitzgerald that maybe you'd be interested in knowing. That's amazing, as I did some research on him. His name is F. Scott with Francis Scott. He is a descendant of Francis Scott Key. You did know it, see? Okay.
What about favorite Chicago meal?
Favorite what?
Meal in Chicago, restaurant.
Favorite meal in
Pizza
Chicago?
guy? Yeah, what do you?
Well,
what's
I'm
your
going to
go-to
have to
Chicago?
name a place, and I'll tell you why in a little while. I love going to Harry Carey's down there, and part of the reason is I'm a minority owner.
There you go. There you go.
But there are many terrific restaurants here.
Your prediction, who do you think will win the Super Bowl this year?
Who's going to win the Super Bowl this year? Predicting the winner is easy. Being right, that's the hard part. It looks to me, again, even though they lost, like the Patriots are the team on top of the heap, although they've lost some very key players. For the Patriots to win, they need Gronkowski healthy.
Yep.
And Gronkowski is such an integral part of what they do. Yeah.
That's great.
Okay.
Anything else you want to share with us? I know.
You know, if I can find it, there is one thing, if time allows,
Sure.
that if I can find it, I'm not sure I can get access to it, but let me see.
All right. Well, what about any just final words of advice
Yeah.
for us?
Parting words. I think there was one thing
All right,
I
my
heard you
final
say.
words
Yeah.
will be
Yeah.
this thing I was just looking for.
There
Oh,
you
you boom.
There you go.
You're just baiting us there.
There we
just
go.
making it more
Yeah.
dramatic. right?
Good timing.
Good timing.
Final words will be something that I'll direct to you, which I directed at the final team meeting I had my last day as coach of the Buffalo Bills. When I walked into the room, I was going to announce to the media right after that meeting, our final team meeting. I was talking to the players. Many of them have been there all 12 years I was with the Bills. Others, like Holishek, more recently, that I had for them while I was departing a wish list. And I will convey that wish list for those of you here as well. I wish for you all an idealism that lasts a lifetime, because the day you become a cynic is the day you're going to lose your youth. I wish for you difficulties, but not an inordinate number. I wish for you the capacity to laugh often, frequently at yourself. I wish for you friends who have earned your trust, and a trustworthiness that earns you friends. I wish for you just the right amount of impatience. I wish for you the opportunity upon occasion to be a 7-point underdog. I wish for you tolerance, given and received. I wish for you being able to say often with a touch of wonderment in your voice, where else would I rather be than right here, right now? And finally, I'll wish for you all certain mechanical skills, I'll call them. The kind that would allow you to rebuild broken dreams, and that will allow you to say, the best is yet to come. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you.